Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast. Today we're going to be talking with a group of American 15-16 nieuwelingen about their EuroCrossAcademy trip to Belgium and the Netherlands, and we have a live audience for that of those nieuwelingen.
Yay!
We will be talking in three groups covering three different subjects. In the first group, we will have Lilli O'Donnell, Jacob Hines, and Camille Culbertson talking about racing in the US and the EuroCrossAcademy Summer Camps. Then in the second group of racing, we'll talk about racing in Europe. Aida Linton, Lucas Young, and Matthew Crabb are on for that discussion. And then we'll end with a discussion about what the life of a young cyclist is like and some cultural differences they have noticed. For that discussion, I will be joined by Ollie Waldron, Graden Ollie, and Tessa. With me now is my first group of riders. On my right is Jacob Hines. Thank you for being here, Jacob.
Thank you for having me, Noah. I'm Jacob Hines. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I'm 15 and I race for Baltimore Youth Cycling.
Then on the other side of my table is Lilli O'Donnell. Thank you for being here as well.
Thanks for having me. I'm Lilli. I'm from Albany, New York. I'm 14 and I race for Fincraft.
And then on my left, completing the table here is Camille Culbertson. Thank you for being here as well. It should hopefully be an interesting discussion.
Thank you. I'm Camille Culbertson. I'm 14. I'm from Charlottesville, Virginia, and I race for Blue Ridge Cross.
So we're going to be talking in this block about racing in the US and how that relates to the EuroCrossAcademy Summer Camps. First, however, we'll do some dilemmas. The first two is a matter of who is the best. So even though our listeners can't see it, you guys will be pointing at each other. So point fingers towards who you think is the best technical rider at this table. So I see three fingers going towards Lilli. Are you that good technically, Lilli?
I mean, I come from a lot of mountain biking. That's kind of how I got into it. So I think, yeah.
Then the next is a bit of the opposite. Who at this table would be the best sprinter? Jacob, you a road sprinter?
I wouldn't say a road sprinter, but I'm just more of a road rider and come from a road background and two mountain bikers at the table, so.
Two unanimous decisions here, so now one that everyone can answer. We'll start with you, Camille. Would you rather win a race in the US or place in the top 10 at a major European race like a Super Prestige or World Cup?
I'd rather place top 10 in a European race.
What about you, Lilli?
Probably place top 10 over here just because it's the races seem a lot harder and it's more of an honor to do really well over here.
What about you, Jacob?
I'd have to agree with both of them. I think a top 10 at a European race is much more honorable, much more prestigious.
So you all value the European races, but of course your season starts in the US. Could you provide a bit more context about what a season looks like for American riders that normally don't really come to Europe at your age?
Well, this year we had the US ECA Series, 4 weekends of 2-day races right in a row, starting in mid-September. And then we get a little bit of a break and go do other UCI races to try to get as many good points before nationals, which is in December.
Yeah, at least for me, the road season ends around the beginning of August, and then I think we all headed to the EuroCrossAcademy Summer Camp and then got ready for the season there, and then a few weeks later, we started our seasons at the UCI US ECA Series.
I had a lot of races back-to-back for a few weeks, and then usually I have 2 breaks. The first one, it's break from UCI races and I just do local races. And then the next one is last UCI race before nationals and there's a weekend in between.
So when you say race UCI weekends, you don't actually race the UCI races, right? How does your point system work for nationals? Because you're graded based on points, and I understand there's a relative ranking depending on how strong the starting fields are. Is that correct, or how does it work?
The more people that start and the better the people are that you're racing with. It just kind of depends on that. If you're racing a Cat 5 race with 20 people in it, there's they all have lower points because they're Cat 5, but there's like a lot of people, so you'll get like less points. And then, but if you're racing like a Cat 3 race with like 25 people, everyone has like a lot better points because they've made it to Cat 3. So they just kind of have to, you get like a lot lower points from that. So it's just kind of like seeing what races, if you're like looking for points, it will be like what races have the most people with like the best points.
And then these categories, how do they work? Because here we have masters categories and categories for amateurs like levels. Do you compete in those same categories, or do you race against riders exclusively of your own age?
So you can race in categories of your own age, like 13, 14, and 10, 11, but most people, like depending on the amount of points you have, you can upgrade your category to, like, let's say I wanted to upgrade my category to Cat 2. I have to have a certain amount of points to do that, and once you do that, you can't go back. So, and you get more points for winning that category than you would your usual junior category.
Yeah, to add to Camille, most juniors, at least for me, the actual junior categories against people our age aren't as competitive, so you find a lot of juniors racing the Cat 2s and Cat 3s, especially at the US CX series, where we start behind the UCI riders so we can fight against the UCI riders too.
We race against adults and kids in our races in the same category.
So from what I could see, most of you race in Cat 2 or Cat 3, and you usually start after the junior men or junior women, and in those categories indeed there is people of all ages, and sometimes also that means all different types of levels. Another important thing to add is when Jacob says juniors in the US, they talk about juniors 15-16 and juniors 17-18. So don't confuse the term juniors with UCI juniors, which is 17-18. When you race here in Europe, you race only against riders of your age. How is that? Because you said in the US it's not as competitive. Is that because there's simply not that many riders? Country is big, takes a lot of travel. Whereas here you start with 80 riders your own age?
There's a bunch of juniors racing cyclocross in America, but for whatever reason, we all kind of at the top end decide to race against in the adult races, maybe for more competition, but there's still smaller fields in the specific kids categories, but not quite what you see over here.
Jacob, you also mentioned that after your road season you went to the ECA Summer Camp. Could you each elaborate a bit on why you went there, what you did there, how much fun it was, what things you learned there? How does a summer camp look?
It's kind of, at least for me, a good tune-up for the start of the cross season. Every year you meet new people and make new friends for the upcoming season, and you get to see those same people at the races and have a fun time. We do all sorts of skill sessions in the morning, and then we also do some longer endurance rides in the afternoon.
It's very a packed week, with waking up early to do conditioning and a run.
I mean, I think it's like a really good way to start the cross season. For me, I was at Road Nationals the week before, so it was good to just kind of like get back onto the cross bike and just like really get dialed in for the cross season.
I've been to these camps. They are indeed a lot of hard work. Very early morning you already start with the conditioning, and then after that you're really in the hands of the cyclocross specific coaches. How is it that some of the best American riders like Andrew Strohmeyer, Jules van Kempen, in the past also Graden Ollie, Lizzie Gonzalez, come out to these camps? Katie Klaus was there this year in Montana to coach, to teach you certain skill sets. Is that useful? What's something you've picked up on, or a drill you remember?
I mean, I think it's cool like to like learn from the best, and also like there's so many like pros there, and I've gone twice, so I was able to get like a lot of different opinions, which is really cool. So if I don't like if I personally don't like how a coach does it one way, like for example, like shouldering your bike, like sometimes people will tell me to do it from the bottom, and then some people will tell me to do it from the top tube. So it's kind of like different, get those different people saying different things and kind of like picking which one works the best for you, but like still knowing that they're both very efficient and they work very well.
The coaches, the pros that come back to the camps each year continue to come back just because they kind of grew up through the same program and they know what it means to the juniors to keep coming back and give back to the community. So it's really great what they do.
I learned how to hop the barriers from Andrew Strohmeyer. That was very helpful. And Lauren Zorner taught me how to ride the ruts better, and it was really great.
So then after summer camp, you've kind of been dialed, you have a month of training before the season starts. You race the bigger events there. You're earlier on the day of the UCI races. That's something that's less common in Europe. Most riders of your age below the junior category race a lot of national level races, kind of what we call in the trenches. There's no big camera crews there. There's not a lot of spectators. It's really where the developmental work gets done. How does that compare? What do you feel about like racing the bigger races in the US and then coming here to Europe to learn in the smaller races?
I feel like I'm just kind of like used to the bigger races now. Like they're kind of, the only races I do are like the bigger UCI races, so they kind of feel normal to me now. I think they're like good experience for when we come here, because like we know what going to a big race is and like having to be super dialed in. So when we come here, it's easier to do like a little bit of smaller races, but yeah.
I also feel like the smaller races that are here are nothing compared to the smaller races in America. The Europeans, they still take these small races seriously, and all the families out there supporting the racers, and they love racing their bikes. So
yeah, the category is still just as hard as the big races back home.
So apart from the fact that these small races here are quite serious, what's something that you've noticed about the courses? Like in the US, we typically see relatively wide courses. I mean, you never know what the weather is like. We've seen USCX series races in the mud, in the dry. But what's something you've noticed, like in terms of the courses? You've done 2 races so far, Haver and Almelo. What does that compare like to what you're used to from the US?
I don't think it gets dry here. I think it's very wet, which is a little different because we don't get a whole lot of rain during our races.
yeah, the courses, even the like less technical courses like Haver, there's always something going on the course, and you have to pay attention. Like even just a straightaway, you gotta watch your line. Whereas in America, it's just a wide open straightaway, and it's a chance to recover.
Yeah, and like the second race we did was really cool too, because it was like a permanent cyclocross course, and there was just like things that you just wouldn't see in America on the course. So it was
Like
really
what?
cool. Well, you could just like tell that like a lot of things are like built in and purposely made for a cross, and it's not just like at some random park. But there was like these like really big like rollers, which were really cool, and like a lot of off-camber stuff like that.
It was a big sand pit. You don't get a lot of sand in the US during your races. The stairs were really cool. They were bigger than usual. And a really long straightaway. I remember that. That was very hard.
Yeah, because that straightaway was also quite muddy, making it a very, very long draining power section in Almelo. Then another thing, when we are here with EuroCrossAcademy on Saturday or Sunday morning, you wake up, you pack your breakfast or eat your breakfast, get in the camper van. How does that compare? I mean, all of you live on the East Coast, so I guess for most races you don't need to travel that far, but this is still quite convenient.
Yeah, it's obviously the drives are all under an hour pretty much, so we just wake up, eat, we do everything we need to do, and we can kind of just focus in on our races and just get everything done that we need to do to have the best race possible for us.
Good. Then to wrap up this section, I would like to ask each of you to give me a song that resembles cyclocross for you. It can be your favorite warm-up song, something you hear from the course, or just anything random. Then to wrap up this section of the podcast, I would like each of you to give me a song that resembles cyclocross for you. It can be something from the start, something from your warm-up playlist, or just anything that makes you think about cyclocross.
For me, it's Opus. I'm not sure who it's by, but it's the song they play on the start line of every World Cup, and whenever I hear it, I just think cyclocross.
Yeah, like the same as Jacob, because like watching all like the World Cups and everything like at home, that's like what you hear, and like it's, yeah.
In the car ride to every race, me and my friend listened to Billie Eilish by Armani White before our race.
Okay, so I will be adding Opus and Billie Eilish by Armani White to the playlist. Thank all of you for being here. Good luck this weekend.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Noah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joining me for the second part of this podcast, a new table full of young 15-16s ready to race here in Europe, which is what we are going to be discussing now. On the other side of the table for me is Aida.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm 15, I'm from Missoula, Montana, and I race for Team Stampede.
Then on my left is Lucas, who lives in Belgium, or Germany actually.
Hi, thanks for having me, Noah. I'm Lucas Young. I'm 14 years old. I ride for AA Drink Young Lions, and I live in Stuttgart, Germany.
So you are an American living in Europe, right?
Yes.
And then on my right is national champion, winner of the race in Haver this weekend, Matthew Crabb.
Hey Noah, thanks for having me. I'm Matthew, I'm 15, and I'm from Buford, Georgia, and race for FinCraft Junior Cycling in the States.
I know you are a very loyal listener of the podcast, just like your dad, so it's good that you're finally on the other side of the microphone with me. We'll start with some dilemmas, and just like in the previous group, you can do some pointing. So let's start with pointing out who the best sand rider at this table is. You can see two fingers going to Lucas. They're going back and forth. Is it Lucas or Matthew? Let's say Lucas. Are you a good sand rider?
When I'm fresh, I'm pretty good in the sand, but I still need to work on my sand while I'm redlined.
And what about you, Matthew? There's some fingers going towards you.
I do a lot of sand training at home. We have a big volleyball pit at the park about a mile from my house, so I do about an hour every week of dedicated skills training, so in the sand. So.
Okay, so the next question is, who has the most competitive mindset? I see some fingers coming towards Aida.
Oh, maybe.
Then the third question, what is something you've learned in these races so far? Lucas, you can go first. We've done 2 races, Almelo and Haver.
So I learned that even if you have a bad day on day 1, that you shouldn't let that bring you down and mess you up for day 2.
I think I've learned most to really minimize mistakes because the race never stops, never even slows down, so any mistake piles on pretty quick.
And you, Aida, have you learned something so far?
Yeah, probably to be really aggressive, especially in the start lap, because if you hesitate for a bit, you could lose a lot of spots really quickly.
So let's go over the trip. In the previous block, we discussed the racing in the US. Then you got selected to this block based on your performances at the summer camps and the races in the US. You arrived here last week on Tuesday. What have you been up to since?
We started with a ride on Tuesday, and then we had a good skills training on Wednesday in the Lichtard Forest. And then we had another training on Friday with Tom DeCourt from Palshausen. And then it was race day, and we had the 2 races, Saturday and Sunday, with a 3-ish hour drive in between. We got here in the Netherlands, had a very easy ride Monday, a trainer ride because of the weather on Tuesday, and a skills training yesterday in Gieten with Jens Dekker.
So let's zoom in on those training sessions first before we talk about the races. You've been training a lot in the sand. How's that been? Matthew already said you don't really have much sand, or at least where he lives. How's that for you, Aida? And of course, Lucas, you live here, but you're still free to weigh in on how those trainings were and how useful they were to balance the ruts.
We definitely don't have any sand where I live in Montana, so it was definitely a new thing to practice. I liked the first day the most, training in the sand, because I feel like I learned a lot. Just how to ride sand, like how to balance in the ruts and to look forward. And
It's a lot different than where I live. We don't really have a great sand pit. All we have is a volleyball court, and I've never ridden sand that goes downhill, and it was a lot different to learn how to lean into and out of a rut so you don't fall.
So Lichtart is of course infamous or famous, depending on which way you want to say it, for how many training sessions there are. But in Gieten, there was also some sand training, and is it right that there was a very big, deep downhill rut super fast through the sand?
Yeah, that was a pretty cool rut that went down the hill towards the lake in Gieten. It was kind of a little similar to how the Kool is in Zonhoven, but a little bit different, but it was still quite fun.
That was probably one of the funnest ruts I've ever ridden in my life. It was just, you could lean so deep into that rut. It was pretty hard to crash if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, it just like spits you right out. But you can still crash. I did it a few times.
And you already said something about finding your balance. In general, like, do you have many ruts in the US in your races if it's muddy, or is it more the slippery type of mud?
It's always quite slippery because in the US it never really rains enough for the whole ground to get wet. So if it ever does get wet, it's really just the top. Whereas here it's kind of always wet and the ground breaks up really easily and forms quite deep ruts kind of quick.
In real muddy Belgian races, there's ruts under the mud. So there's the watery mud on top, and then there's ruts that you can't see, and they're very dangerous in the race.
So apart from training in the sand, you also did other drills. Aida, is there anything that stood out in yesterday's training in Gieten, or any of the Lichtart training sessions that you thought was quite worth mentioning?
we did a lot of practice with like controlled braking and making it up and around some off-camber hills, sort of. And that was good because I haven't done much of that.
So what is controlled braking?
Not braking like all at once, or like going into the corner with good speed and coming out with speed, or like 2-1 none.
And how did that like play out in the races? Because in Almelo, that was of course before the training in Gieten, but would you say with the benefit of hindsight that you could have taken some sections there differently?
Yeah, probably. I could have done some of the corners smoother and come out with more speed, yeah.
So if we talk about those races, first we raced in Haver on Saturday. That was a Belgian race. All three of you raced in different races. Lucas, you raced the first year race. It was your provincial championships. Is that right?
Yes.
So how did the race go?
It was kind of a disappointing race. I started second row, but faded about halfway through the race. Came across the line in 13th. Just knew that I needed to not worry about that result and just focus on the next race in Haver or in Almelo.
How do you deal with that? You said you knew you needed to focus on the next day, but obviously you said you were disappointed. So how do you deal with that disappointment and recharge yourself for the next race? And how did that next race go?
So I knew that I just had to leave the past in the past and just focus on the next race. Couldn't change the past. There was nothing I could do about it. I didn't want to waste energy on thinking about that race and just getting mad at myself. The race in Almelo went way better. The course suited me way more. There was more elevation, more slippery mud, and had a better result. Finished P14 with 2 years combined.
Matthew, you also raced in Haver. It was your first Belgian race. You needed to start quite far at the back. Could you tell us a bit about your opening lap? Because I was super impressed how quickly you moved forward in that race.
Yeah, it was very difficult to come from, I think it was 53rd call-up. So there was a lot of spaces to be made up, but luckily I have a bit of road background and my start was pretty good and was able to move probably 20 spots into the first turn and then every turn after that was 1, 2, 3 guys at a time until by the end of the first lap I was in the front group of 4 with a little bit of daylight.
So from that leading group of 4, it looked like you were yo-yoing a bit. At some point, it looked like you were getting dropped a bit. You came back, then placed an attack, then looked to be dropped again, and then ultimately placed your final attack. What was going on there? Were you struggling on the power sections, on the technical sections? Did you make some mistakes? How did that middle part of the race pan out?
So there was this one ditch section in the middle of 2 long straights. So you did a straight, hit the ditch, and turned around to 180 and did the next straight. And I was quite a bit slower on that, and then it cost me in the straightaway right after. But I was a bit faster in all of the turns and technical sections after that before the end of the lap. So almost every time I was able to catch back up into the group, even though I was getting distance a little bit. And then in the end of the race, I knew I had to be leading into that ditch before the kind of last power section. And we actually came in 3 wide on the pavement, and it was kind of a all-out sprint that we all started at the same time into the grass, and I made it out first. And I was faster in all the technical sections and kind of held on to a small couple bike length gap.
So you took your win in your first Belgian race. In your Velo journal entry, you wrote that it was quite emotional for you coming here because it's something you've been dreaming of pretty much your entire life. How did you deal with that during the race? Was it hard to remain cool in that leading group, or is it similar and you've been in that situation in the US so you could perfectly execute now as well?
I mean, I think it kind of helped and maybe made it a little different from in the US because there was just that extra little bit of drive in the end of the race. When I was getting a little bit gapped, as Noah said, I kind of just remembered like everything that was leading up to it and what it meant to be here, and gave me that little extra that I needed to stay in and move back to the front.
Then the next day you raced in Almelo. Here you had like call up 63 or something, like very, very last of the riders to be lined up. How was that race? Course was more technical, you got a very big rain shower.
Saturday's race definitely made Sunday a bit harder. I kind of gave everything I had on Saturday, and then of course the last row call up on a pretty narrow start straight made it difficult to get up to the front, and by the time I could, probably a lap and a half in, the race was already very split up, and I kind of just had to settle in.
Then Aida, you raced the girls 15-16 races. Both days you needed to start after the elites. The gap on Saturday was smaller than on Sunday. That's something you're used to already from the US. But with what type of expectations did you go into those races?
I had no expectations going into the race just because I had no idea like where my fitness would be compared to the people here. So I didn't have any expectations. I just wanted to try as hard as I could.
You obviously went all out both days. In Haver, you had a bad start. You were quite far back in the pack. But then in the second and third lap, you really worked your way forward. How does it feel like to move through the Belgian field, also through the elite field in your first European race? Is that surprising or?
It was pretty chaotic just because, the start was pretty, you went straight into this corner, so I did not move up there at all. And then the power sections were really good for me because I think my strong suit's power more than technical riding. So on every straightaway, I would just try to pass as many girls as I could. But they were all a lot more aggressive than they were in the US, so it was definitely a bit of a shock. But I was able to make it through.
You ended up fighting for second place. The girl that ended first, Lentil, was long gone by that time. Mm-hmm. She was very strong. She also won the elite race if she would have counted towards that ranking. Mm-hmm. You were fighting with a Belgian, and she got the upper hand of you in the final lap. What kind of went on there in the final part of the race? Because you led her for most of the race.
Yeah, it definitely was not my smartest moment. I think for a bit I wasn't sure if she was my category or an elite, but I kept thinking that I could drop her on the straightaways, and then she kept catching back up to me in the corners. And then I thought that I would just be able to stay ahead of her last lap and be first into the last corner and sprint her, but we caught 3 elites who then she came around me and the 3 elites right before we went into the last couple of corners, and I couldn't get back on her wheel. I got stuck behind the 3 elites, so she got away from me there.
You took a 3rd place. Then the next day you raced in Almelo, a more technical course. You said that in Haver, the Belgian girl kept catching up to you through the corners. But in Almelo, did you experience something similar with the Dutch girls or no?
Almelo was very different because I was with 2 Dutch girls who were teammates, I think, and they were working together against me, sort of. But I knew they were in my race, and I knew that I would have to be smart to beat them. I think it was more of me trying to stay on them for the first couple of laps, and then with 1 lap to go, I went into more of an offensive position and attacked them. But then I slid out, and they caught me. So then I attacked them again and was luckily able to put enough of a gap on them to hold it till the finish.
So those are some insights into the V races, as they are called here, the developmental races in Europe, Haver and Almelo. Next weekend is Hilversum and Emmen. You have some races done now. Are all of you focused on results now that you know roughly where you rank, or are you still completely open-minded going in?
I think I have some more expectations now that I've completed my first Dutch race. I'd be quite happy with a top 10 in these Dutch races.
I don't think I have too many expectations. I don't want to put too much pressure on myself, but it would be nice to podium again or maybe win, but I wouldn't be disappointed if I didn't, because as long as I learn a lot, I think it'll be good.
I think I'm a bit of the same. Not really looking for any specific results, but I do feel like after last weekend with not the best starting situation, I think podium this weekend maybe would be possible if I were a little bit farther up, which I should be, seeing that I got a few points.
Then, just like in the last group, the final question will be what song you associate with cyclocross for our playlist. We can really get that going now with 9 extra songs today.
I think the song Sandstorm is a big representation of cross for me. It's just in the beer tents and the cyclocross after parties.
I would probably say the AC/DC song. I think it's called Thunderstruck. Probably that one because it places a lot of our local races.
I think Delhi by Ice Spice really gets you going on the trainer and gets you in that super hyped mood before the race.
Okay, thank all of you for your presence. The listeners can find our playlist in the comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Dank u wel.
With me now for the final part of this podcast are 3 more riders that have been part of this blog, and we're going to be talking about the life as a young cyclist, as well as go over some cultural differences between the US and the Netherlands/Belgium. On my right is Oliver Waldron. Thank you for being here, Ollie.
Thank you for having me, Noah. I'm Oliver Waldron. I'm 15 from Littleton, Colorado. I race for Donovan Racing.
Then on the other side of the table is Graden Ollie.
Hi Noah, thank you for having me. I'm Graden Ollie. I race for Team Stampede out of Missoula, Montana, and I'm 14 years old.
And then on my left is Tessa.
Hi, I'm Tessa. Thank you for having me. I'm 15. I live in Boise, Idaho, and I race for Birds.
So we have 3 different states at this table represented. Which one is the best? Colorado, Idaho, or Montana?
Colorado for sure.
Probably Colorado.
Why Colorado?
It has the best snow.
For
they
cyclocross?
They have the best trails. They have the best mountains. They have the best everything, basically.
So we'll start with some other dilemmas. So we'll do some finger pointing again. Who is the best rider at staying calm under pressure during a race? Who executes best?
Yeah, I think I get pretty locked in when I race.
Okay, the next question is, who is most likely to down a bag of Haribo at the finish line after the race?
I think it's definitely me. I have a bit of a sweet tooth, so I love me some gummy bears.
So then let me start asking this question to you as well. What's the best thing you've eaten on this trip?
When we went on one of our cafe rides last week, we stopped at a little cafe and they had this thing called an apple flop, which I'd never heard of before. And it's like this like triangular pastry with sugar on the top, and it has apple pie filling. And I got it, and it was really good. So it's probably my favorite thing I've had while we're here.
What about you, Tessa?
My favorite thing I've had when we're over here is definitely hot chocolate at the cafe where they held the Dutch national championships.
In Nijstad, the venue of the 2024 Dutch Championships. Graden?
Probably Pete's cooking. It's just really good. I mean,
Pete is our cook. He's been working hard here, making food for us every day. So, what does a day look like when you're here? Because obviously you ride and you race, but you also do other stuff. So, what does a day in general look like here?
We wake up at like around 8 or 8:30, and then we go on like a morning walk. It's just like a short little 15-minute walk around our little campsite area place, and then we usually start riding pretty early at like 10. So we just go back and have breakfast, then get ready to ride, and then we'll get back at like 12 or 1. So then we just shower and have lunch, and then it's usually study time until like 3 or 4, so we can get all of our schoolwork done, and then dinner's at 6, and then we have like a meeting about the day, like for the schedule for tomorrow and like overview of today at 7, and then we just kind of chill at our houses, or sometimes we go in the hot tub and we just go to bed at like 9:30, 10.
So how's it going combining this with school? Because Graden and Tessa, I've heard that you've both been locked out of your school accounts.
that was definitely hard just because we couldn't do any schoolwork, so like definitely falling behind a little bit, and I definitely think it's gonna be a push when we get back, but I mean it's just kind of part of the whole experience and thing.
So what actually happened that they locked you out of your school account?
Something about the VPN and not being on Wi-Fi even though we were, and we had to contact the school.
Everything is sorted now?
Yeah, for me at least.
What about you, Tessa?
Due to like the VPN thing, mine is locked down until I get back to America.
So I think what's going wrong is that your schools are not used to students being out of the country. They think you're using a VPN when you're just actually logging in on the internet here, which makes it appear you're logging in from Belgium or the Netherlands, which is true, and that flags something. So what subjects have you been working on in the meantime? What work have you been doing? What's your favorite subject in school? Something fun you've done here while working, studying?
Well, I brought my big AP Human Geography textbook, so while my computer was locked out, I still got to do that.
I mean, I have all my textbooks too, so I didn't get locked out of my account, luckily, but so I've been doing everything that I could online, and then also reading my textbooks and stuff like that, but I had to miss some quizzes and tests and on-paper assignments.
Are you still on track, Ollie?
I think so, maybe a little bit behind, but I feel like I'm pretty on track, sort of.
You have a test tomorrow. What's it about?
Oh yeah, got the chemistry test tomorrow. It's about like balancing chemical equations and stuff like that.
So then in these trips, the days are quite packed and it's hard to really get out. You don't really have much time to visit or sightsee things. But you did go shopping in a couple of stores. Tessa, you went to a Lidl in Belgium and you really wanted to visit the Jumbo here in the Netherlands, right?
I mean, there's a lot of cool things there. We met some local Dutch kids, which was pretty interesting to experience, like the culture from their point of view, I guess.
And why did you want to visit the Jumbo? Why did you want to do shopping there?
I think the old Team Jumbo Visma is pretty famous, and I thought that it was cool to go to the place behind the team a little bit.
And then, of course, everywhere where you are here, you see companies or stores of companies that sponsor cycling, cyclocross teams. How is that? Does that hold any significance to you, any of you?
I think it's super cool to see all the sponsors and stuff, because when you see like all the teams on TV and stuff, you're like, and then you see them here, you're like, wow.
I think it's pretty different because like when I was telling my teachers about like why I was going to be gone for a couple of weeks, that they didn't know like what the sport was at all. And then like me and Jacob were walking to the hot tub last night, and then there was this random guy we saw with his dog, and then we told him we were here for cycling, and then he knew it was cyclocross like immediately, and that was just some random person that we've never seen before. So it kind of just shows the effect that this sport has on the people of this like area of the world.
Then the riding. So how does that compare to where you live at home? We've done forest training, but more focused here on the road rides. So how have those been? Today we went to the Vanberg. Maybe start with that. How was your ride to the Van?
It was pretty cold. It was cold, and then it started snowing on us a little bit. But I think it was when we got there, it was cool to see like, cause isn't that hill? It's made out of like trash, right? Yeah. So they put grass over the trash, and it was kind of just cool to see like a cycling, like a sole purpose of cycling, like just that, cause they don't have many of those in the U.S. or like none at all. And it was just cool to see.
I know where from I live, and most of the people sitting at this table that we all live in very mountainous places, and the Netherlands and Belgium, or where we've been, don't have very much mountains, and it was cool to get some elevation and like see a hill.
I think it's very different in the way that like it's made for, or there's lots of places where cyclists can ride, whereas where we live it's kind of just like on the road with cars, but here there's like bike paths and then like specific cyclocross parks.
And how is it to see when you're on the Vanberg, you say it's fun to get some elevation, like what does that sign on the top tell you? Like if there's a sign on a climb that says 4,800 centimeters above sea level, what does that tell you about people like me who ride here on a daily basis?
That they're mainly used to flat and low elevation and below sea level ground. Us are usually used to steep, high elevation climbs.
Personally, I could feel the elevation a bit when I was walking up there. It's getting a bit tough to breathe. But luckily, we survived. We made it up there through the wind, through the snow, through the rain. Didn't need the oxygen mask that I did bring in my backpack. But yeah, does it seem appealing to you to ride on flat terrain like this, or do you prefer to ride at home? And then I just mean like the terrain, regardless of cyclist safety.
I think it's kind of cool to mix it up once in a while, because I feel like for me personally, I just train on the same roads like week in and week out. I think it's kind of cool to train in a new place, even though it might not be as interesting. But I think it's just kind of cool to experience a new training area.
I think it's good to mix it up, but I think overall having mountains and hills can be a lot more beneficial.
You can do an altitude camp on top of the Vanberg. I don't know what you're on about. That's some serious altitude right there. The weather, you already said, it was quite bad. You're getting a real good introduction to Dutch weather. We haven't seen the sun in about a week, I would say, maybe since you've landed. So how have you been doing with that? It's been quite cold. We've had some snow here. How has it been adapting to weather and the consequences that has on your training?
It's definitely affected our training, just because some days it's been even too cold and we had to do a trainer ride inside. But it's definitely different and rainy and snowy and dark and gloomy all the time, but it's fun because everything's always wet, so it's like a different kind of riding.
I think we've covered plenty about the riding part now in the block. Anybody here have any other interesting hobbies they like to take on when they aren't riding? Some good pastimes when they have some free time here?
We all played like a team wiffle ball game. That was pretty fun. We played it in the parking lot right next to the Lichtart Forest while we were in Belgium.
European football or football americano?
Oh, it was wiffle ball and football americano.
Okay, and what about you, Graden? Any things you do? Just nap, or what do you do when you don't ride or work on school?
I have taken a couple naps. Mostly just hanging out and talking to the other teammates.
Some yapping sessions, Tessa?
Yep, that's about it. Some core work, some TikTok dances.
So we had some yap session training. Did it prepare you good enough for this podcast? Anybody think they can replace Issam?
Oh, I think I can definitely replace this song. I feel like I'd be a little bit of a better addition to the podcast.
I don't know if I can replace Rebecca or whatever your
That's a really
AI
high
friend's
standard.
name is.
Okay, well, Isam, if you hear this, they're coming for your position, especially Ollie. We're racing this weekend, so maybe a final question to still have you talk a bit about the racing. Any hopes or expectations for this weekend, Hilversum and Emmen?
In Haver, for me, I got 9th, and then on Mellow it was 7th, so I'd be pleased with another top 10, but I try to not put expectations on myself to keep the pressure off, but I feel like you always have a little bit of pressure on yourself, like when you see how you've done before, and just try to do it again. So I'd be pretty pleased with another top 10 or better.
Yeah, I'm hoping that I can just like put in a good ride to show like what I've been training for.
Hoping to ride a good race and really dial in all the lines of what the course is, and not trying to put too much expectations on myself. But now that I know the speeds of some of my teammates that are here with me, maybe I can stick with them a little bit.
Good. So then the final question of this podcast will be to name a song that you associate with cyclocross.
I don't particularly know what it's called, but the heartbeat song that they play at the start.
Also the Opus song.
Yeah, that one.
Yes.
Was already mentioned earlier, so it's definitely going to go into the playlist. What about you, Ollie?
I kind of discovered, Noah kind of put me onto this song called The West Side, which is this like Dutch rapper guy. Then yeah, that's one of the ones I associate with cyclocross.
Any like songs that they play at like the start line of like any local or NICA kind of races, they kind of bring me back to that start line feeling.
So for you, we'll add the song Liberté, which they played at the start this weekend in Almelo. And with that, we have, well, not 9, but at least 7 new songs added to the playlist. So we're finally hitting the 10 songs mark on the playlist. Ollie, Tessa, Graden, I think that wraps up this discussion. Thank all of you for being here. Good luck this weekend.
Thank you for having me, Noah.
Thank you, Noah.
And that will conclude this episode of the Cyclocross Social Podcast. Thanks everyone for listening. We will be back this weekend covering the World Cup in Ireland from the ground. See you guys then. Goodbye.